Okay, Eddie, do you want to take it over from here?
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us this evening. My name is Eddie. I am on the Juno team. Happy to talk about financial aid appeals here. I spent the last decade of my career both in college admissions and as a high school college counselor. So I was previously in admissions at Williams College, a small liberal arts school in Massachusetts, and then at Yale University before moving um, to a college counseling role at a school in Massachusetts. I'm originally from Illinois. I actually grew up not far from the Wisconsin border myself, right about 10 minutes away. So really happy to be partnering with DebtSmarts and with Carol, and just a lot of the great work that they're doing. Now, a lot of the conversations that families have on the appeals process, I wanted to make sure we had some time to really emphasize that before the common reply date of May 1st. So we're really getting in at sort of some of the final moments here. But I emphasize that to say it's not too late. Want to make sure you're all well equipped to know how you can minimize the cost of college through some both merit-based appeals and need-based appeals, because that is going to be a huge part of reducing the cost in the first place before you have to figure out anything else like outside scholarships or borrowing, is how can you reduce the cost of college in the first place. Um, I'm going to go relatively quickly through some of the presentations. Again, I want to be mindful of everyone's time here. I know we don't have too much time. Want to leave time for questions. So anything I don't cover, again, everyone will have access to the recording. Everyone will have access to the slides. We wanted to make sure that you can digest this material. You can sit with it. If you have any questions, you can reach out to either one of us. We'd be more than happy to help. Um, just to start, again, a quick disclaimer. Want to make sure that you are reaching out to appropriate professionals. I know we sometimes have conversations on sensitive financial materials, but just know that any kind of specific conversations is independent or is individual to each family. So I encourage everyone to look to particular financial advisors, tax advisors, any kind of financial planners to really know the nuances and the details of your specific situation. Now, quickly again, I'm just going to go through some of the primary reasons why a student can submit a merit-based appeal and then also a need-based appeal. Please feel free to post your questions in the chat. I want to make this as interactive as possible. Again, I'll get through as much of maybe the material first, and then feel free to post your questions in the chat, and I'll try to keep my eye on that, but we'll save most of that for the end. So many of you, especially if you are high school seniors or the parents of high school seniors, you've likely already received a financial aid offer at this point. And so what do you do now? When you think about that, again, it can be really daunting because this may be your first time going through the process or the first time your child is going through the process and you have no idea what to expect. You don't know what is normal because it is your first time. But think about this as the letter that you receive as the first draft of your financial aid offer rather than the final draft. This is really important to know and I guess to think about from a psychological perspective because oftentimes there's families will have a hesitation to even ask because it can be a little bit uncomfortable or a little bit awkward. So just know that schools will not rescind your offer of admission just because you ask for additional aid. Aid offices go through this, admissions offices go through this every single year. It's a very common practice. It's not something that you have to worry about in terms of asking for more. Now, again, there's different opportunities where a school may be able to accept an appeal or not. They may deny an appeal. But if that's the case, it's better worth trying and seeing what the options are than to not try at all. I'm going to spend some time talking about merit-based appeals and need-based appeals. So, on the merit side, this is anything that relates to a student's achievements or abilities that are particularly attractive to that university that they want to recruit for. And the school will then administer or give additional aid to that student to help bring you to their university. So, you can think about this in terms of academic scholarships, if a student has a particularly high test score or a GPA they've taken really strong te courses over the course of their high school career. They might be a national merit semifinalist. Other qualities like a student may be a recruited athlete. They may be a very talented musician. any kind of combination of different skills and talents that the student brings to that university to get them to make a really big impact at that school. Now, on the need-based side, which is where we're going to spend more of our time together talking, it's how your financial circumstances impact your financial aid. And so this is unique to every family because you may be facing particular circumstances that are not quite fully reflected on the financial materials that you submitted, your financial aid application. So there are reasons to know why you can, and also I'll talk about a few reasons that don't count, why you can't appeal successfully a financial aid award. But just know that we're going to go cover several reasons, and as to what might be a valid reason to submit an appeal letter. Now, to think about merit-based appeals first before we get to need-based appeals, wanted to cover just a couple quick tips. First, you really want to be selective about who you're asking. Just ensure that the student really wants that program. And so in the letter that a student submits in a merit-based appeal, they're communicating their excitement for the program, their fit for the program, and particularly if the program is able to meet any funding gaps, that the student would be really excited to enroll, right? And so that is, you want that to come from a genuine place, not just to say that for every single university. You don't want to waste your time or the university's time if you're genuinely not interested in that program at all. And so it's a collaboration, which I'm going to talk about as well, like working with the financial office, working with the admission office, whoever's handling the merit-based appeals, in order to make it work for you as a student to be able to say yes to that university. It does help if a student has received multiple admission offers and particularly scholarship offers, where you can weigh out the costs, the final costs associated with each of them. Now, what's important to know is that you want to emphasize the net cost here, not just the total scholarship amount, but once you have the total cost of attendance, from that you subtract the financial aid that the student received, whether it's need-based or merit-based. And from there, the remaining amount is the financial need. And what is the cost then of that financial need? How much of that need is covered by scholarships, right? So it may not be enough just to say to a university, oh, one school gave me a $30,000 financial aid package. Can you also give me $30,000? The reason that isn't as compelling or that doesn't quite work is because schools cost very different amounts depending on the type of institution. So if you're looking at a private university, which can easily cost, unfortunately, upwards of $90,000 per year, and they give a $30,000 grant to the student, your net cost is $60,000. So the family has to figure out a way to pay for that, right? Now, a $30,000 scholarship there is going to look very different when the total cost is 90 versus a school that costs $40,000 and you get a $30,000 scholarship. So your net cost is only 10,000, right? So those scenarios are not quite the same in terms of the total amount. You always want to emphasize, especially when you're comparing financial aid offers, schools as they relate to the total net cost, especially amongst peer institutions, right? Peer groups. So if you apply to similar types of universities, how they generally will package financial aid somewhat similarly. Every school will do it differently, but similar aid from similar types of schools. So comparing public and public schools, private and private schools, and that can allow you to maybe leverage one offer compared to the other to see if a school can either match or get close to it. And again, just a reminder, know that you've already been accepted, so school won't change their minds just because you're appealing. You really want to focus this as a collaborative conversation, like I mentioned. It is not helpful to go in demanding anything, right? These are your biggest advocates. Oftentimes on the merit side, it does tend to be admissions officers who who spoke on your behalf in an admissions committee to vote for you, to see you on their campus. And so they're already in your favor. You don't want to threaten to withdraw. You don't want to over exaggerate any kind of competing offers. You will be asked to provide any competing offers. So if you are deceptive in any way, that is absolutely not going to work to your benefit in the process. So make sure you go approach this process from an earnest place of trying to make it work. You love the university for many of the reasons you applied. You want to reiterate those reasons, and a little bit additional financial aid can really help make your dream of attending that university a reality. So you want to do this before the enrollment deadline, right? And this is why it's really important. I'm glad we were able to have this conversation today before May 1st. Generally, after you've received multiple offers, and many of you may have already received multiple offers, but before the enrollment deadline. Now, a common question that I get, especially as we are here on April 27th, is am I still able to negotiate or am I still able to appeal a financial aid offer if I've already accepted? You can, it is possible, but if you do lose a lot of leverage if you've already accepted the offer. And at that point, really the most compelling reason that you can provide is if you do have a different offer in hand from another university to be able to say, okay, I'm still really excited about this school, but I have this other university where maybe the net cost is $10,000 less. Are you able to meet that difference or come close to it? Right? Because in that case, you don't necessarily have to enroll at the university that you submit an enrollment deposit. There generally are consequences in that you would lose the enrollment deposit. But if another school does come in with a more attractive offer and you do wait until May 1st, or even at that point, that's where you can still weigh out your options. I've talked to a lot of families who they were really excited and the students were really excited. The moment they got their admissions decision, they submitted their deposit and moved forward. Or there's other cases, for example, where a school maybe it's not even a matter of excitement, but the school might demand an enrollment deposit for priority housing, for example. And so the timeline has been accelerated. And so you may have already submitted enrollment deposit as a result. It's not too late, but again, know that if there are other options that you still have available that do have more generous financial aid, that's going to be the best bet in terms of leveraging that. Otherwise, the school basically knows that you're attending anyways. So again, you can be approved. There may be maybe a school isn't able to meet the full amount that would be helpful to your family or that you request, but potentially have a partial increase or any kind of other types of financial aid available. Or the worst that can happen is that they deny an appeal, so they're not able to give you more aid. But it's then important to ask if there's any opportunities in the future for additional aid. Now, again, don't be shy about this. It's very normal through the process. It can be awkward, but if you're going through this for the first time, just know that hundreds of students, if not more, are going through this as well. Now, to focus again a little bit more on the need-based side, need-based financial aid is calculated based on the information presented on the FAFSA and also the CSS profile for schools that consider CSS profile or that accept the CSS profile. Excuse me. I'm going to focus primarily on the FAFSA because every school will use that. Now, some of the information on the FAFSA is a little bit outdated, and so that may not work in the favor of your family. There's a big difference between the total cost of attendance, like we talked about, and what the final financial aid package may be, especially if a student has demonstrated financial need based on the results of their FAFSA. So for all of you who have gone through the process, you probably know what your student aid index number is. If you don't, you can find it's online. You can find it on studentaid.gov. And so the number that's calculated is an index that is then used to subtract from the total cost of attendance to then identify how much financial need your family has. So the lower the student aid index number, the more financial need you have. We have an entire presentation on the student aid index, so I'm not going to go in detail here. You can find it available on our website. It's joinjuno.com/webinars. All of our webinars are free, so feel free to check that out if you're interested. I'm hearing an echo. If Thomas, you can mute yourself, that'd be great. Thank you. So again, feel free to check out all the free webinars we have on our website. But as you go through the different parts of the required materials, the student aid index is calculated based on income data from both the student and the parent. So the income data is considered based on the student income and parent income. The asset information is based on both family assets, so parental assets, and student assets, if the student has any assets. And then family size also factors in. That's what gets calculated through the FAFSA, and then Student Aid Index spits out that number. It's between negative 1,500 and 999,000. So the lower the number, the more aid that you need. And the larger your family size, for example, the more income is protected under the income protection allowance. So a family needs additional resources for a family of six if you compare that to a family of three, for example. Now, again, this is where the FAFSA may not fully capture everything. So income data, if you've already filled out the FAFSA, you know is based on what's called prior year data or income data from 2 years ago. So for all the seniors in the audience here, if you're entering in fall of 2026, then the FAFSA uses 2024 tax information. So that's what your parents had to submit. Now, 2024 income information works for a lot of families and it's totally fine. But for many families, it's not reflective of where their financial situation is today, right? And I'm going to talk through examples of that. That's the issue here, where it's some of the information isn't quite up to date based on what is going to be asked of you. Asset information generally is up to date, but it may not always be the case depending on when you filled out the FAFSA. So today, for example, the FAFSA opens every year on or around October 1st. This year was a little earlier, but generally by October 1st, FAFSA becomes available. So if you fill it out then, your asset information is submitted based on the time of FAFSA submission. So if you applied anywhere early, for example, early decision, early action, you would have reported your information as of several months ago, given that we're now in April. So this can work if you are applying, if you submit your information close to when you're actually applying. But again, there can still be a little bit of a lag. So differences now, for example, maybe a family had some unexpected medical expenses over the last couple months, and that has been a drain on the family savings. That's an important thing to know. And then additionally, in terms of family size, the FAFSA actually does ask if there's multiple children in college, but it doesn't actually adjust the aid index anymore for that information. So that's a reason to appeal if a family is paying for multiple children in college. Now, the next three slides, I'm not going to go in detail. Again, I really want this to just be a reference for everybody. You will have the slides. You can go through this information in greater depth. I'm just going to speak very high level so we can get to your questions. But some of the reasons for submitting an appeal based on financial need include income reduction. So if your income has decreased from time of submission, if a parent has had an involuntary job loss, and whether they were furloughed, whether they were laid off, whether they were let go for any other reason, that needs to be documented. Any kind of one-time change in income as well, whether it's an increase or a decrease, just make sure to be aware of that. So if you did, for example, sell a property, a secondary property that you had back in, let's say in 2024, that information is going to be reflected or should have been reflected when you filled out the information for fall of 2026. And then again, any kind of reduction in child support as well. In all of these examples, I'm going to stress the importance of documentation. You have to provide proof to the financial office that the circumstances that you're claiming are true. Financial officers have professional judgment, the ability to leverage what's called professional judgment, which is making changes to your circumstances, but they have to have appropriate documentation. They can't do that just because you sent them an email. You have to provide those medical bills for any unexpected medical expenses, right? Any kind of documentation about a condition that someone in the family is going through. But again, these are all factors that a financial officer can consider. There's no guarantee. I will say again, some of these factors are going to be school dependent based on the budget and the resources available at each financial aid office. But every school will do the best that they can to provide as much financial aid as equitably as possible to all student financial aid applicants. And this is where I again want to emphasize the point of approaching this from a collaborative manner because this can be a really sensitive topic. And just know that schools are doing the best they can. Financial officers are on your side. They're not the enemy in this conversation. So as you're thinking about how to navigate through these next steps, then think about that from the way of what can I do to provide information to my admissions officer or my financial officer that can best serve best provide the information that they need and allow them to make the case before a financial aid committee. So any kind of documentation you have, if you're caring for a sick or elderly family member, any other high fixed expenses, like a lot of times now, unfortunately, some parents are still paying off their own debt while their children are now going off to college. So any of those kinds of circumstances or experiences that you may be facing can be a warranted reason to submit an appeal. And then finally, if there's another sibling or parent enrolled in college as well, we talked about this a little bit earlier. You want to let financial officers know about that because the FAFSA no longer automatically reduces the student aid index based on multiple children in college. And so you can let your financial officer know about that. And then any changes in family size or the death, unfortunate passing of a parent, or in the case of divorce or separation. Particularly in the case for the FAFSA only schools, divorce or separation is handled very differently than schools that also accept the CSS profile. So generally, for FAFSA, only one parent in the case of divorce or separation is going to be asked to be the contributing parent on the FAFSA. And so if there's been a change since you applied, then that's going to be an important update for financial officers to know. Um, in initiating a need-based appeal, these generally are handled by the financial aid office. And so they do have the authority to make adjustments. It is on a case-by-case basis, but just know that you want to present the best case possible for your situation so that you can equip the financial office to know and have all that they need before they meet as a committee. Gather all your supporting documentation, your financial documents, and that way you can draft an appeal letter and include all the attached documents. And then, of course, schools do have to allow you to submit appeal, particularly if there's been changes in your financial circumstances. Those are really key reasons to know as to, any kind of changes in income, particularly reduction in income. That's a very common one that tends to be one of the most popular. So let your schools know if that is relevant to your situation. And then I also just want to stress a couple of reasons that don't count. So unfortunately, if this has happened, financial officers will not consider, they will deny an appeal for these reasons. Any changes in retirement income, any changes or particular reductions in investment assets that you own, whether it's, a stock market, whether it's cryptocurrency, whether it's real estate, the nature of these assets is that they are risky and volatile. So if your cryptocurrency has gone significantly down, that's not going to be a reason that you can appeal to a financial office to ask for more aid. I see a question about students who are self-sufficient, who are above 18 without a sponsor. This is this puts the student in a really tricky situation. So if there's no parental support for that student, then a parent's refusal is not necessarily going to be the reason why a school will give more aid. Now, there's a bit of a more nuanced conversation, which I'm happy to address if we have the time for it. A student who is considered independent has to meet specific criteria on the FAFSA for independent status. And this is completely irrelevant to how they're claimed on taxes. So there's different circumstances in terms of a independent versus dependent student for the IRS versus the situation of an independent student for FAFSA. For the purpose of the FAFSA, in order for a student to be considered independent, they have to be at least 24 years or older. Or they have to meet one of the following criteria: 24 years of age or older, a graduate or professional student. They are a ward of the state, at homeless or at risk of being homeless, in the armed services or a military veteran. And then there might be one or two more reasons. But there are, again, specific reasons why a student is considered an independent student for FAFSA purposes. And if that's the case, they're eligible to borrow up to the independent student limits on the federal direct loan, which for freshman year is $9,500 versus the $5,500 for the federal direct loan for dependent students. Doug, I'm happy to have a longer conversation with you if you have any follow-up questions there. Um, but again, a parent's unwillingness to borrow the Parent Plus through the Parent Plus program or not having a creditworthy cosigner is also not going to be a reason a school will give more aid if the parent is unwilling or unable to borrow through the federal loan market or the private loan market. And then I'll just say last quick thing, I wanted to highlight this tool because I think it's really helpful, especially as we're kind of in a crunch time here before May 1st. Juno created this free tool. It's available to all families. Here's the website is here, joinjuno.com/appeal. It's completely free to use. You fill out your information, and then you'll get your appeal letter. We ask for your email so we can email you the appeal letter. You'll get it emailed to you, and then you can go through this. If you don't remember anything that I say tonight, please just remember this tool. Play around with it. You can pick out different circumstances that are related to your situation, whether you want to submit a merit-based appeals letter, a need-based appeals letter. We talked a little bit about multiple children in college, but we didn't talk about dependency overrides. This was getting to our last conversation based on the question. So depending on the type of appeal you need to submit, you can include appropriate information. What's helpful is for merit-based appeals, if you have multiple schools, you can include those offers here. What I want you to emphasize and focus on is that rightmost column, you pay, that number, right? That's effectively your net cost. What is the cost to the family? And so this is where you can compare, okay, Duke and Ohio State may not be comparable institutions because they handle financial aid very differently. But if you apply to Ohio State, did you also apply to University of Michigan? Did you also apply to maybe Penn State and see similar types of schools and how you can compare your overall costs there? And then similarly, so the tool actually it will write a competitive appeal letter based on the school that makes the most sense. And then on the need-based side, again, you can select the reasons for your appeal. It'll actually draft an appeal on your behalf. And then what's particularly helpful is the list of suggested attachments. So make sure you provide the documentation that's needed so that you can minimize the back and forth with financial officers, especially on the timeline crunch that we're in now. It's going to be key that you get everything in as soon as possible. I'm gonna pause there, and then the last thing I'll leave this up. I won't talk about it because many of you may know about these changes already, but there are changes to the federal loan policy starting July 1 of this year. So if you are a high school senior or younger, this applies to you. If you are a current college student and you've borrowed a federal loan in the past, you can still borrow under the current policy, which is up to the cost of attendance without any lifetime limits. But any high school seniors and younger, so for the parents in the audience, you can borrow only $20,000 through the Parent Plus program annually. That's the federal limit now. And lifetime, you can only borrow $65,000 in total lifetime. So unfortunately, again, this may force some families into the private loan market if they meet these caps. Let's turn our attention to any questions that folks may have. Good question. So if there are there any different details for international students? So yes, it will depend on the university. So some universities will provide financial aid for international students. It depends on their budget. And so many will, but they are more competitive. Many schools in the US are not need blind for international students. There's quite literally only like you can count them on almost one hand, two hands. the number of schools that meet 100% demonstrated need and are need blind for international students. There's not many. There's about 6 or 7 schools. So if international students do need financial need, it is possible within a school's financial budget, but the budgets tend to be lower. Um, in if international students won't qualify for federal aid, so the FAFSA will not be relevant for those students. There are opportunities for the student to borrow if they do need to in the private loan market. The best case scenario for international students is that they have a US-based cosigner who can cosign on their loan. Absent that, there are options for a student to borrow, international students to borrow, but it's generally going to be at much higher interest rates. Great question. Any other questions? Or if anyone wants to um, unmute, you're welcome to unmute and ask your question or to type it in the chat.
This isn't doesn't have to be the end of the Q&A, but I will go ahead and uh, pick our winner for the Amazon card, just because I know we
Yeah.
are a little bit long on time here. So let me do this.
And in the meantime, I'll just point to if anyone is interested, or if anyone sort of the work that we do at Juno, I'll just say is really it for families that do need to borrow. If and only if you get to that point, it's really how can you figure out how to get the best loans possible or the cheapest loans possible. So we leverage collective bargaining to help families get better rates and terms. Our internal deadline, so for the group, is actually April 30th, so just in a couple days. If anyone is interested, it's completely free. Joining Juno is free. We never charge you anything. We don't ask for your credit card information or money anywhere on our website. It's completely free. Basically, what it is a mailing list where you agree to be contacted once our group negotiations go live. So at this point now, we've entered and we've started conversations with lenders. We will continue to do so all throughout May, and then release deals that are sort of the most competitive that we've been able to negotiate on behalf of uh, tens of thousands of families that we're working with. So if you are able to join, it's just helpful because the more families we have, the better leverage we have in the process. And so when we come together, there really is strength in numbers. I'm a Juno member myself. I'll just mention that I'm currently in grad school while also working at Juno. I use Juno for my student loans. That's how I'm able to pay for it or cover it. And so I actually started as a user of Juno first before I joined the team. So happy to answer any questions. Again, there's like no cost to sign up. There's no credit check or anything like that. But yeah, let's see. Do we have a winner?
Yeah, I did the old spin it, and so we have Saul Marcus is our winner. So Saul, I will be yay. I will be emailing you afterwards with the information and the redemption code for the card. Um, and the one thing I'll just add on to here, so um as you are figuring all these things out, you also, I know that many students get very worried about borrowing, or they see their offer letters and they think, okay, I guess this is what I have to do. You can choose to accept all or part of a loan offer. And similarly, I think, Eddie, you would say with Juno, you can put your name in for that negotiation and it doesn't commit you. But it's much better to be able to think through what everything's going to cost you once you're going to college, And sometimes students underestimate that, and then they can be caught in a situation they didn't actually allow enough money for that semester, and then they end up having to, use a credit card or something. So you do want to be very realistic about what your cost of attendance is going to be and map that out in borrowing in the most prudent way you can.
Yeah. And if we have time, maybe if I can just mention one other quick thing, because I remember hearing a panel of the largest student lenders in the US, and they were chatting, and one of them brought up an excellent point that I think is so important. I believe it was on that panel. Someone was saying that a lot of times students remember their high school students remember their ACT score or their SAT score or their GPA, and they're super proud of that. And that's fine. Like students should be proud of however they score. Maybe some want to completely forget it altogether. The most important number that you should remember as a high school senior, or that you should know as a high school senior, and I'm speaking to the students now and especially parents, and is exactly to what you were just sharing now. Like, know how much your student loan payment is going to be if you have to take out loans at the end of it. That number is going to impact your life significantly more in the day-to-day than what test score you received when you were a high school junior or sophomore, whenever you took it. Calculate the cost that you're going to have to incur to help pay for college. If again, hopefully you don't have to, but the reality is for many families, they do. Even if it's the federal direct loan, calculate what that number is, and that's the number that students should focus on. That's the number you should know because that's going to impact in a very real way the decisions that some students are able to make, what jobs you might be able to pursue, how quickly you can repay any kind of loans that you've taken out. So emphasize that because the more you know and the more informed you are through this process, the more you shop around, the better informed as a consumer you are, the better decisions you'll make, and the less likely you are to get taken advantage of. I'm scrolling through to see if there's any other questions here. Yeah, happy to help afterwards. I can paste if I type here, I can paste my email in the chat. Um, as Carol was saying, like if you join Juno, it is no obligation to do anything to be associated with Juno in any way. You don't have to take out a loan or anything like that. It's just an option for you to consider. And I strongly encourage families to shop around. Oops, I think my computer just um, I strongly encourage all families to just shop around to see what their available options are to them. And again, our whole mission at Juno is just to be one of those additional options. It's a free option for potentially lower rates based on what we're able to negotiate as a group.